Welcome back to another episode of Archie's Sonic Character Files as we explore the histories of the inhabitants on planet Mobius. In this episode, we take a look at the history of Big the Cat. Wait a minute, Big the Cat? Pfft, fuck that shit, we're talking about these guys instead. Yeah, bet you didn't know Sonic himself met Max, Savage Dragon, Spawn, and all these other characters. All of which were featured in an amazing and awe-inspiring crossover event that is easily 10 times more amazing than some shitty-ass character that only shows up for the sake of pandering to the Sonic meme crowd. They made their first and only appearance in Sonic Super Special Issue 7. They were just too epic and awesome to be featured in anything else. We start off with our main character, Particle. You can tell she's the main character because she's wearing a headband, which was the style at the time. She's busy playing Tetris Attack on her Game Boy Color when Sonic and the Freedom Fighter suddenly barge in, wanting to have a turn. Annoyed by all this, Particle flashes them, and they all faint. She then decides to go to Angel Island to find some peace and quiet to play on her Game Boy. But then Knuckles suddenly shows up saying that he wants to play. Well, that and the fact that his Game Boy broke and he just really wants to play Titus the Fox. Particle then shakes his hand because she's a big fan of the Guardian of Angel Island, and then Knuckles is all like, "Oh my god, a girl touched me! Awesome!" And then he faints. Particle realizes that her Game Boy is running out of juice, so she uses the Master Emerald's power to fully charge her Game Boy. Oh yeah, and some random guy named Scolder wants to play on her Game Boy, but she beats the shit out of him instead. Man, everyone's addicted to the Game Boy in this story. Anyway, Scolder wakes up and tells his mom Mully that the reason why he was after her Game Boy was that his Game Boy broke, and he was so close to beating the final boss in Bugs Bunny's Crazy Castle 2. So she takes him to an electronics store to buy a new Game Boy. Good news is, the store accepts their 50% off coupon. Bad news is, they're all out of Game Boys. The store owner goes to his son Eddie, asking what happened to the last one that was in stock. The kid recalls how he was walking out of a liquor store and saw Sonic and friends chatting it up with Spawn. Basically, they're just talking about movie adaptations as Sonic wants advice from Spawn on how to make a Sonic movie since he recently got a Spawn movie. Then Eddie shows up and finds out that Sally is the one who took the last Game Boy from the store, saying that she needed it because it was the hottest new model with a built-in Game Boy camera, rather than getting an add-on for it, though she's not pleased with the results. She agrees to give it back after asking if Eddie is any good at inserting cartridges, quote-unquote. Eddie is too stupid to understand the innuendo. But then suddenly Shadowhawk appears. Yeah, what's the deal with that name? He doesn't even look like a hawk. Anyway, Sally is bummed out because the Game Boy she borrowed is running low on battery. So they crash into a mall to find the nearest store that sells batteries. But it looks like they picked a bad time to go shopping because now they're being chased by the Jolly Green Giant, now working as a mall cop and sporting a mohawk for some reason. But then Shadowhawk and the Green Giant get captured by Magneto's evil twin brother, Electro. But then the plot thickens. We find out that Dr. Ian Droid has stolen the Master Emerald and plans to use its power to create the ultimate gaming device known as the Game Boy 2. But then they all get knocked out when the train that they're on suddenly goes through a wormhole and teleports them to Gallifrey. Don't you just hate it when that happens? Well, anyway, Dr. Droid is victorious, the heroes are defeated, and nothing will stop him from creating the ultimate bootleg gaming device. But first, he's ready to open up a package that he got off of Etsy. Meanwhile, Particle goes looking for the bathroom and kicks her sister out of the stall because she really has to go. And by using the toilet, just so happens to free all the other heroes, including the newcomer Velocity, the long-lost female member of KISS. Oh yeah, then Grimace shows up for some reason. They all grab the Soul Emerald, but then Dr. Droid shows up who's all like, "Hey guys, check out this cool remote I found! It changes scenery! Now it's a city! Now it's Robotropolis! Now it's Sesame Street!" And then a mighty battle ensues between the good guys versus the evil forces of Warner Brothers, who want to destroy Sesame Street. Knuckles, being fed up with all of this, decides to put an end to the madness by letting out a mighty "Oh!", which then destroys the space-time continuum and sends everyone back to their homes, leaving behind a now-deaf Dr. Droid. And as for Particle, well, she's just bummed out that she lost her Game Boy. So, moral of the story, Sally is the only one worthy enough to have a Game Boy. Alright, so if you were paying attention, yes, this is another April Fool's episode, where I got to have some fun by making up some random shit for this story. and then talk about my real thoughts on the issue later. First it was the last game cartridge hero, now it's the Archie Sonic / Image Comics crossover. But hey, now that we have that whole Sonic and DC crossover going on right now, I figured it was a good time to cover this random story. So yeah, much like the last game cartridge hero, this was another story written by Ken Penders. And you can tell just how all over the place this story is, from all the sci-fi slop, to having the story focus on one of his own creations, to ending with Knuckles pulling a Deus Ex Machina. Despite being a crossover, the Sonic characters barely interact with the Image Comics characters. Most of the time, they just show up for small bits or a quick cameo. It has that same problem that Worlds Unite did, where they crammed in a lot of characters and most of them barely got to do anything and just felt pointless. As for how they handled these Image Comics characters, well, I'm not really the best person to ask about that. I'm not very familiar with Image Comics' catalog of franchises. All I know about them is this crossover, and their recent adaptation on the Patchwork Girl of Oz. So I have no idea who the Savage Dragon is, or who Union is, or all these other characters that show up. I'm sure they've all had quite the lengthy history with their own franchises and all that, but this comic doesn't really do a good job with these Image Comics characters, especially for a newbie like myself. Well okay, I do know a little bit about Spawn, and it's quite hilarious with how Archie Sonic handled him. First they spoofed the character from the very early days of Archie Sonic, then they decide to have the real Spawn meet Sonic and the Freedom Fighters, and despite all the advertising hyping up this crossover, he only gets 1 page of screen time. Yeah, even he knows that this is a stupid story and ducks out as soon as possible. And then there's the inclusion of Particle and the main baddie. While never given a name in the actual story, it would be revealed by Penders that his name is Dr. Ian Droid. And apparently the original idea for this character was that he was Dr. Robotnik from an alternate universe. While the idea ended up getting scrapped, some elements are still present in the comic. Like, he talks about how he already encountered Sonic in the past, but never elaborates on it, and of course the comics never bring it up again. As well as that random moment where a bunch of SWAT bots show up to serve him. But either way, he's just a very meh kind of character. Same with Particle. I guess she looks neat and all, but I really don't have much to say about her. It's sort of well known that this comic was done to be more of a backdoor pilot for Ken Penders' own series for Image Comics, known as The Lost Ones. Ah yes, an epic and long adventure that lasted for 1 issue. I haven't read this comic. The most I know is that Ken Penders was really trying to hype the series up as the next greatest thing by advertising t-shirts, which I highly doubt any of them got made, and a trailer pitch for a movie. Yeah, if you thought his pitch for Sonic Armageddon was bad, then you ain't seen nothing yet. So yeah, just a bunch of empty promises from hyping up for a series that never went anywhere. Who knew that Ken Penders and Keiji Inafune actually have something in common? As for Wolf Scolder and Lana Mully, well, they're just uninspired parodies of Fox Mulder and Donna Scully from the X-Files. Especially the ending, where it says that this story is dedicated to the X-Files creator Chris Carter, and I can only imagine that this was just Penders going all fanboy mode when writing that. I would write this off as non-canon stuff, but they do reference certain events, like Mammoth Moogle being trapped in the Master Emerald for a time, or how the story ends with Sonic and Tails going off on their quest to find Naugus. Which means that this story would take place somewhere in between issues 57 and 58 in the main series. But much like Sonic X issue 40, this story is nothing but filler, and you really wouldn't miss anything important if you decide to skip it. Especially since it was never given the reprint treatment. Though here the reasonings why is more obvious with all the legal issues with Image Comics and all that. Heck, they had to censor the cover when it was featured in Sonic Mega Collection. Though somehow Particle gets a free pass despite her connections with Image Comics. And that takes care of the Archie Sonic / Image Comics crossover story. It might have been a big deal back in the late 90s, but nowadays it just falls into that category of obscure crossovers that you've never heard of. A comic where its only value are for hardcore Archie Sonic collectors, or hardcore collectors of any of the characters from Image Comics that got featured. Well, it takes care of this character file, so until then, I got a juice!